I mean, what's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going team by team.
I would be very careful about slinging stones.
Am I going to get sued?
We got legal on this?
Let's send you out on the right note. PFF sucks. Have a great day, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson, live on YouTube. Talking top three players this week, Sam. Top three players on every single team.
Yeah.
We came into the day very optimistic. Hey, we'll do top three players on all 32 teams. And then we came out of it more realistic.
Yeah.
More realistic.
We've dabbled in the last couple of weeks with full 32-team things, and we've snuck them in under the 8-hour mark. But today we thought, if we're talking three things per team,
it's a lot.
We're not getting there in a regular one-show sitting. I would also just like to put it on record here at 9:05 a.m. in the morning that I was not the reason for this delay. This was the rare Tyler fault delay. In the booth over there.
Yeah, just
lurking
around.
Just like to put it out there. Just like to put it out there on the record that it was not me or you. In fact, it was him.
His fault, completely his fault. And we apologize for the tardiness. And
on Tyler's behalf.
On Tyler's behalf, and it's just on YouTube. It's just on YouTube, which is structured differently. It's a whole different. What is going on here? The whole view, the whole look is different.
YouTube's broken for you?
It's challenging. Oh, they moved the thumbs up. They're hiding the thumbs up behind the chat.
Well,
so if you're in the chat, I think you have to close out the chat, hit the thumbs up, and then you could go back to the chat.
What are you looking at? Mine is
right
where it's always been.
I just have a whole different interface here. Did I break something?
You like a beta tester?
I might be.
Fancy new YouTube?
Beta. All right, so what are we doing? Top three AFC.
Yeah.
How'd it go the other day without me?
It went good. Myself and Trev.
I was on super secret assignment.
Super secret assignment.
Super secret assignment.
To Miami, right? Just like Police Academy.
You're losing some of the secrets here, but yeah.
That's still perfectly secret. I'm only given a location for a secret thing that's taking place.
No one knows where we were.
No,
in Miami.
Okay.
Although if you did see me walking around,
you're not hard to. Yeah.
You could have seen me.
You're quite conspicuous.
But back from Miami, and we're here. And shout out to our friends over at Western and Southern. We're going to go see them this week.
Live.
Yeah. We're going to go see our friends at Western and Southern, hang out with them. It's going to be great. Get all dressed up.
Right, in better get-up than we're currently wearing.
Yeah. It's going to be.
They've stipulated that we're the kind of business that doesn't wear Macho Man T-shirts to the office.
No.
Yeah. Or in fact, rugby jerseys.
No. We will be suit and tie, ready to go. So all right, we're going to get into the AFC's top three players. It's an article over at PFF.com. But first, as a busy parent, you want to give your kids a head start in their financial future, but investing can often be both confusing and time-consuming. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it easy for you to set up an investment account for your child that grows with them and helps prepare for their financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a UGMA account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. UGMA starts for Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. While your kids can't invest while they're minors, a UGMA account allows you to invest on their behalf and gives their investments more time to grow. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolio is managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Monthly minimum contribution required. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, so this is another one that Trevor did on PFF.com.
Indeed.
So if he picks the wrong players,
it's all his fault.
Always his fault. We'll talk about what he wrote down and see if there's any other players that should be in the mix.
Yep.
Sound good?
Yeah.
There's also, before we begin, there's a rumor floating around here.
Rumors
about Justin Jefferson getting paid.
Yeah. We spent a lot of the show with Trevor talking about.
I was busy in Miami. I didn't get to hear you.
Right. It was because it was fresh on the news of the Jalen Waddle contract.
Waddle, Jefferson getting paid.
So we were like,
Malik Neighbors rumor.
If Waddle gets this amount of money, Jefferson's going to get all of the money.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
It hasn't happened yet, but we will keep an eye out.
We will talk about it.
We will keep an eye out during the show, and if it breaks, we're going to have to pause things and talk.
All right, here we go. AFC. So this was PFF.com. Every team's top 3 players for the 2024 NFL season. We're going team by team in the AFC, starting with the Ravens. Trevor has Lamar Jackson, Roquan Smith, and Kyle Hamilton. Discuss.
Yeah, I think that's a fair trio. There will definitely be people off the back of last year that will be clamoring for Madubuike to be one of the 3. And, it's a reasonable call. I think based off last year, it's a reasonable call. Number one, a couple of things about Madubuike, because I got a lot of pushback on the top 10 interior defenders list that was out there.
Shocking.
From the top 32 rankings that were put out there, because Madubuike was not in the top 10. Number one, I don't think he was quite as good as the sack total was last year, so immediately we're starting off on a slightly warped outlook of what Madubuike actually is as an interior defender. And then number two, that was by far the best season we've seen from him. Other guys have had years like that and then not done the same thing. So I think immediately my default position is always, if a guy has just set a new, radically different high watermark from anything they've done previously in their career, that should probably not be your benchmark or your baseline for what you expect them to do the following season. So yeah, if you got that version of Madubuike going forward every single year, he would probably be in there. But can you rely on that?
Last year, number 9 in PFF WAR, so 9th most valuable defensive tackle.
Right. So even last year, based off those sack numbers, advanced data, when you start factoring in more things, you're talking fringe top 10 guy, not the best guy out there based off the sack totals.
Yeah, so I'm with you there. I mean, I think Lamar Jackson and Kyle Hamilton, are slam dunks. I think if there was a debate, Roquan Smith versus Mark Andrews, maybe.
Mark Andrews, and then if you could get a healthy Ronnie Stanley back, he would be in the conversation as well. But again, it's been so long, can you rely on that? The other guy, by the way, just as an outside shout, he's only just arrived in the building, but Derrick Henry probably deserves to be in that conversation as well.
Yeah, we weren't adjusting for position, I assume, in this one.
No.
It's worth talking about Roquan Smith, though. I mean, in PFF grading terms, he had underachieved a little bit, especially in the run game in his time in Chicago, but almost instantly when the Ravens traded for him, felt like an immediate force multiplier for that defense. The grading also matched it. And look, I'll admit this too, right? Like grading, we always talk about the grading's not perfect. And there are also things like, is a player legitimately a force multiplier? Is he bringing something to the scheme that is either difficult to quantify or easier to quantify by looking at the totality of the defense, And I'm not talking like on-off splits for a 4-game sample. That stuff is noisy and inconsistent. But clearly there's something with Roquan Smith, the way they've deployed him, the way the Ravens defense, after picking him up in the middle of the 2022 season, things have been different.
Right.
So Roquan Smith deserves that credit. And then Kyle Hamilton, to me, slam dunk. We're talking maybe the best safety in the NFL. There were games last year. I mean, he's like the dream when you talk about a do-it-all type of player, similar to what Derwin James would do at times for the Chargers.
Right.
Remember, there was the 3-play sequence against the Chiefs last year where he had like a pressure, then a pass breakup, then then he blew up a screen. Right? It's like he could cover down the field, he could blow up plays in and around the line of scrimmage, and he can rush the passer. Kyle Hamilton can absolutely do it all. And I think continues to emerge as one of the best players in the entire league.
Yeah, and the difference, I think, between him and Madubuike is he was really good right away. Like, year one for Kyle Hamilton was really good. Last year was definitely an improvement. It was definitely a quote-unquote career year, but it wasn't, a massive deviation from what we've seen from him previously. It was just the continuation. It was like, dude is amazing right out of the box. Last year, we've taken it to an even higher level. We've seen nothing but high-level, extremely top-quality play from him.
All right, let's go to the Buffalo Bills. Top 3 players, Buffalo Bills over at PFF.com. We have Josh Allen.
I thought you were staying. That's fine. That's fine.
Oh, do you have more on the Ravens?
No, I just thought I thought we were going to go by division, but instead you're
I'm going
alphabetically within the conference.
I'm going pure alphabetical here
that
within the conference.
madness. But
Is that
that's
okay?
fine. No, it's fine. That's fine.
Buffalo, because it's in order,
Yes.
and I'm just going to scroll.
It's cool. Let's go.
Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen,
Yep.
Matt Milano, Greg Rousseau.
Yeah. So obviously Allen is the no-brainer, the slam dunk. Somebody made this, it might have been Trev actually, but somebody made this point on Twitter recently that like once you get beyond Josh Allen as the obvious, like this is not a roster that's loaded full of like top quality players. Now that you've traded away Stephon Diggs, like Matt Milano.
Really quick, in the write-up, Trevor does mention Stephon Diggs, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Von Miller, Tre'Davious White are either no longer with the team or, in Von Miller's case,
Right.
not the same kind of impact player.
So you've kind of, once you've got rid of those guys, you're like, well, Matt Milano probably is in that category, but it's not like he's old, but like 30 years old coming off a serious injury, right? So there's some unknown/uncertainty to that. I mean, Ed Oliver would be at least in the conversation, Teron Johnson in the conversation, but these are not like top tier guys that you expect sort of championship caliber rosters to be stuffed with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think the Bills, so the Ravens I always described as when you look at their depth chart, it's a sea of green, right? PFF green, solid, good players.
Yeah.
But clearly we just discussed 5 potential players that could be in their top 3 that are, among the elites at their given positions. 5 or 6 players, really, among the best, within a top 10 adjacent, we'll say, at their position. Okay? The Bills don't have as much of that. I was a little surprised. I'm surprised by this. I still think they'll be good. I've been a big defender of the Bills. Hey, let's not overreact. It's okay if the big names get a little bit older or end up somewhere else. But yeah, we are talking about like a year ago at this time, Von Miller would be on this list and Stephon Diggs would be on this list.
Yeah.
And Von was not the same last year. Andy was battling injuries, and Stephon Diggs wasn't the same last year and clearly was bad enough. Well, not bad enough, but fell apart enough that he's out of town.
Or Milano would have been on the list a year younger and pre-injury,
I mean, I think last year at this time, it's clearly Allen, Stephon Diggs, and then Von Miller / Tre'Davious White kind of battling for it. And then you'd say also considered includes Matt Milano and Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I mean, that's how deep they were a year ago at this time. And then, some of those guys got older or are out of town.
Yeah. I mean, we've shorn a lot of the top quality players from this roster in one way, shape, or form. And like the third guy on this list is actually pretty difficult to identify. You would say, I mean, Rousseau is not a bad answer, right? Who's the guy on Trevor's list. Ed Oliver would be in that conversation. Teron Johnson would be in that conversation. I mean, even somebody like Deion Dawkins maybe. But like, that's very quickly getting into the territory where you would be like, that's not a ringing endorsement of the roster.
Yeah, I like Rousseau. I don't want to downplay how well he's played. He came out, was solid as a rookie in 2021. Remember, he sat out the COVID year, 2020, coming off a ton of sacks in 2019 at the University of Miami. And he's just continued to get better. 21, 22 last year, peak grade of 87.1. Got the length, can move around the defensive formation. Rousseau's really, really good. And then Milano, I think we've seen how well he can cover running backs. He is one of those really versatile coverage type of linebackers. When he's healthy, the defense is different and better. And when he's unhealthy or he's hurt, he's out of there. It's a challenge for the Bills to piece it all together. So, it looks on paper like fewer impact players in Buffalo. We'll talk more about it throughout the offseason, of course, about what that actually means for the season. But as far as top 3 players, it doesn't look the same as it has in the past.
Right.
All right, we're on to the Cincinnati Bengals. We've got Joe Burrow.
Yep.
Jamar Chase.
Yep.
And then the third one, Trevor's going Trey Hendrickson. And I think that's a clear battle between Trey Hendrickson and T. Higgins. Which way would you go here?
I mean, I think the 1 and 2 are definitely slam dunk, obvious answers. Yeah, number 3, I think those are probably the players that you would have listed. Is there anyone else? Mike Hilton maybe would be in that conversation as well. Geno Stone is coming off a career year, but again, a little bit like Madubuike, I'd say what's the baseline expectation rather than what he did last season.
Plus, like, let's see it again type of thing.
Yeah.
I think the debates between Trey Hendrickson and T. Higgins, clearly Burrow and Chase.
Yeah, I think Hendrickson is the correct answer. I mean, Higgins, number 1, he's been more consistently good. Number 2, Higgins isn't coming off a great year. I think Higgins is starting to become a little bit more of those players where the idea of Higgins might actually be better than the reality of Higgins.
No.
I don't know.
No, I mean, just into like. Let's
So,
not,
okay,
just in
he's
2000
being talked about in the same breath as Brandon Ayuk in terms of like veteran player that might be available for trade if you want to stump up a first-round draft pick, right? If you gave me the option right now of Brandon Ayuk versus T. Higgins, it would be like 95% of me would take Ayuk, but 5% of me would be on the Higgins side of that.
As I always like to do, last year at this time, Ayuk kind of broke out last year. It's not that he wasn't good previous to that. He just looked special last year. If we were talking after the 2022 season, is it a toss-up? I think it was clearly Higgins. Because Higgins in 22, Jamar Chase got hurt, and T got to step up and be that wide receiver 1 for several games, and he did it, right? So I think it's I think it's closer than you're saying, even though clearly I agree. Ayuk was much better last year and took this step forward in his career where it's like, yeah, Ayuk is an elite route runner. He's elite at the catch point and does everything extremely well, and I want that guy.
I mean, I think he was pretty fantastic the year before as well. Like, again, Ayuk feels a lot like Kyle Hamilton, where it's been this continuous progression towards absurd. And the only thing, not even holding him back, but the only cap on his play right now is the fact that the 49ers offense is amazing, that they run a specific type of offense. He's not going to get the volume that some other number 1 receivers are. And they've got 17 other amazing players to feed the ball to as well. I just think the gap between him and Higgins is significant. And again, like I feel like the conversation around Higgins at the moment overlooks the fact that he hasn't ever, like, he's not shown at any point that he can be, outside of like a few games where Jamar Chase was out, he hasn't really shown that he can be that number 1 guy in an offense for any period of time.
Going back to Hendrickson, joined the Bengals in 2021. Remember, he was more of a part-time player with the Saints for a few years, had never played more than 661 snaps. Super Bowl year, plays almost 1,000 snaps and over 750 over the last couple of years and continued to play better. I mean, Hendrickson, grade-wise, getting better. He finishes plays extremely well. So I'm fine with Hendrickson as the play here. I mean, he is an impact player for that Bengals defense, and really important as it's difficult for them to keep around players like DJ Reader, and there's been turnover on that defense over the last couple of years. Hendrickson's been a key part of their success.
Back-to-back seasons with a PFF pass rushing grade of 90 or above. I mean, he's there are no questions about what his ceiling and what his sort of true capability is relative to T. Higgins. So I think he's the right answer.
All right, let's go to the Cleveland Browns, and we've got Myles Garrett. I don't know what the order is here, but Myles Garrett should be number 1.
Yes.
Then we've got Zadarius Smith and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, with also considered by Trevor here, Denzel Ward, Amari Cooper, and Nick Chubb.
Do you want to break in and do the Justin Jefferson news now that it's official? Official? Yeah. Jeff just tweeting it. That's official. Okay. Breaking news.
Well done.
Justin Jefferson has signed a record-shattering contract with the Minnesota Vikings. 4-year, $140 million contract extension that includes $110 million guaranteed and makes him not only the highest-paid wide receiver in NFL history, but the highest-paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Jefferson's deal includes $88.743 million due at signing. So he has an $88.7 million signing bonus, effectively. The highest non-quarterback guarantee at signing in NFL history. Not a signing bonus, guaranteed at signing. Resets the wide receiver market.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, this coincides with the Vikings moving on from Kirk Cousins and going with the rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. So it's like and it's a 4-year deal. Right in line with the 4 years that J.J. McCarthy is extremely cost-effective here. So it's I think a smart move by the Vikings to lock him up, and the impact of the true number 1 wide receiver. The league has been trending this way for a while now, that it's just receiver, right? If you don't have an elite quarterback, the next best position to pay is the elite wide receiver. As far as on-field value, I think they clearly bring the next most on-field value behind the quarterback. And then it's a matter of, from a team building standpoint, do you want to invest $35 million per year in this one position? And, that's where things are trending. So huge contract here for Jefferson.
Yeah. Schefter says there are multiple teams this offseason that inquired about trading for Justin Jefferson. The Vikings let each one of them know in no uncertain terms that they had zero intention of trading Jefferson. And then the conversations ended right then and there.
Is that a shot? Is that a shot at Mike Florio, who was suggesting that the Justin Jefferson, that they were going to draft Malik Neighbors and trade Justin Jefferson?
I mean, maybe. I think it's a shot at
Florio's
everybody that's been saying, trade talks, blah, blah, blah.
No. We're trying to stir it up. I like insider jabs. I like when the insiders take jabs at each other.
So we spent a lot of the show on Thursday with Trevor talking about how the longer you wait to get a deal done in terms of the team, the worse the number ends up being, right? You just get it done the sooner you can because the number is only going up, right? Every contract that's signed between you starting negotiations with a player and finishing negotiations with a player only increases the number. You are never going to get it cheaper by arguing it out. Schefter says the day before last season kicked off, remember, he got hurt last season, missed a chunk of time. Like, if you're looking at last year, it probably didn't help Jefferson's cause on the field, right? The day before last season kicked off, Justin Jefferson turned down a deal that would have paid him over $28 million per season, right? So he's gone from 28 to 35 in a year where he got hurt and didn't necessarily dramatically enhance his value on the field. Jefferson bet on himself and it paid off. 4-year extension, 35 a season. So I don't know where they would have gotten that deal done. They turned down 28. He signed 35 now. What would the number have been before the season that would have got him to sign on the dotted line?
That was before they knew what they were doing with Cousins.
Right, but there's $7 million a year in wiggle room there that the Vikings potentially could have bridged to get that cheaper had they got him locked up before. It's just this fascinating dynamic now, which makes it like, I don't know if it's sort of traditionally all the leverage is with the teams, right? And what is the player really going to do? But this is putting leverage back in the hands of players. Like, the longer they string it out, the more expensive the deal gets for teams. So you can probably get them to sign a pretty chunky deal right on.
Is Jamar Chase next? Where's he?
Yeah. I mean, he's a year after, right? But he's probably next in line.
So you got A.J. Brown at $32 million a year. Amon-Ra St. Brown just over 30. Tyreek Hill at 30. Jalen Waddle just got to 28.25. I mean, Devontae Adams is way down at 28 now.
On a deal,
After
that was the outlier.
He was like $7 million higher than anyone else at the time, right?
Yeah.
This thing's accelerating. And Nuke Hopkins used to be at 26 or 27, and he was well above everyone else.
I mean, where does that put Jefferson among quarterbacks, right? In terms of average per year, it's up. It's top
probably
half,
50.
right?
If we're just looking at APY,
Yeah, I mean,
it's between Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr,
right? So he's now getting a mid-tier quarterback
right
contract.
around 15. And so it is interesting, right? Because we've done shows about this before, Sam, where it's like, all right, how many QBs do you choose
before you get to the first?
You get to either the head coach,
right,
or the first wide receiver, right? How many impact QBs are there? And we always land at like 8, right? There's 8 quarterbacks that you take before you take your Justin Jefferson, your Jamar Chase, and now you're talking about we're going to pay him the equivalent of what a perfect range, right? Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith.
Yeah.
That's the range. That's the range of guys where it's like the receiver might have as big of an impact on the rookie quarterback, a J.J. McCarthy or anyone else that's on a first-year contract as signing this quarterback like a Baker Mayfield, a Geno Smith, a Derek Carr, who play at a level that's like fringe playoff, not really making a playoff run, but you might get on the green type of thing. So I think the market's kind of
it's in the right place,
the right spot.
Yeah, I think it is about the number one. It's the right player for that deal, right? Like maybe Aaron Donald would have been that player in previous years. Now, if you're like, who's the first NFL player you take after the quarterbacks in this, mythical redraft of football? It probably is Justin Jefferson. Like, he's the guy you're grabbing next. Number two, the contract range is probably landing in the right spot. You take all the transcendent quarterbacks, and then once you get to the guys that aren't necessarily raising the level of everybody around them, you take the first special guy at some other position, which is Justin Jefferson. So I think the NFL is actually, the market is ending up in the right spot, both in terms of the player and the value. And, for the I think this is a good deal for both sides, right? Jefferson gets his genuinely outlier contract, resets the market, all those terms. He gets paid. And number two, the Vikings lock up. Like, my approach for this is always, there's a level of special that you just don't trade those players away, right? There are other guys where, okay, he's really good, but he's not all-time special. We can trade them away and, restart and use the collateral to rebuild and all those kinds of things. When you find a guy like Justin Jefferson, like, that is the whole point of the draft. You identify and you completely change everything with this one guy. Never trade those guys away. Never. Just give them the contract, whatever it takes. Keep them in place. You can take on, a certain number of those crazy contracts, even if it is best paid X of all time. Like, you have one of those.
Yeah, it changes in 2 years.
Right. Yeah, it does. And you've got at least one of those in the bank, right? The salary cap is structured in such that you can always make that one deal happen, particularly when you have a quarterback on the rookie contract. So, makes sense for both sides. They finally get it done. And I think it's a perfect deal for both of them.
So I mentioned Jamar Chase, but all eyes now on CD Lamb, same draft class,
yes.
Dallas Cowboys.
So this is a perfect example, right?
They're waiting.
Yeah, and it's only going up.
They've waited on Dak. They're going to have a QB. The Cowboys, of course, are going to have a QB and a receiver looking to have the top of the market deal.
And this is the worst contract they could have hit for Dallas's perspective in terms of CD Lamb. Whatever about how much Jalen Waddle's deal inflated the market, I mean, this literally reset it to a different place. Like, this is the equivalent of that Devontae Adams deal from a few years ago where nobody wanted to get a wide receiver signed for a while after that because the market was seen as, like, the agent looks at that and goes, hey, market just got reset. Change all, like, rub out the whiteboard. We're in a new set of math here. Let's restart from there. And the NFL is like, no. That's an outlier deal. We ignore that one. We're still working from the old math. This is the reset.
All right, we back to the Browns now?
Yeah.
Cleveland Browns, top three players. Look at that, perfect.
Smooth.
Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. That's who Trevor selected. I think Myles Garrett, absolutely. The other two, worthwhile discussion between Zadarius Smith, JOK, and then guys like Denzel Ward, Amari Cooper, and Nick Chubb.
Would you throw Wyatt Teller into that conversation as well?
Maybe a Wyatt Teller in there.
Honestly, Amari
Joel
Cooper should be in.
Batonio at this point.
Yeah.
I'd probably go Cooper, maybe over Zadarius Smith.
I think Cooper, both guards. Nick Chubb has to have an asterisk next to him because of the injury. You just don't know what he is anymore because that injury was so devastating.
Another one, a year from now, he's absolutely in the top.
Oh, a year ago, he would have been number 2 without question, I think. It would have been Myles Garrett number 1, Nick Chubb unquestionably number 2, and then we're talking about the third guy.
It's an interesting difference of conversation that we're having with the Browns and the Bills, where the Bills, it was like Josh Allen, and then I don't really know who these other guys are. The Browns have a legitimate 6 players that could be in this top 3 conversation, none of which is the quarterback, by the way. So that's the difference. Doesn't mean the Browns are going to be better, but it comes back to all year we're saying the depth that Cleveland has built is really impressive.
And the quarterback himself has the potential. Like, if you got the version of Deshaun Watson, when is it, 2020?
Yes.
Like, whatever that last version where he was playing at that elite level, I mean, he would be in that unquestionably. Theoretically, that guy is still there. We just haven't seen him for a few years.
Justin Jefferson's rookie season was the last time Deshaun Watson was good.
5th wide receiver taken, by the way. He ends up the best paid wide receiver in NFL history. So this whole world of, hey, got to get the guy in the draft that you think, you don't know.
Anyway, Amari Cooper maybe battling with and I love JOK. I think Zadarius Smith, he's heading into his 10th season. 10-year player. He has been a fantastic complement to Myles Garrett. Remember, they brought him in before last season. The 2022 Browns were not rushing the passer well enough. It was Myles Garrett and, a little bit of Jadeveon Clowney, and they needed an overhaul on the defensive line. And Zadarius Smith was a huge part of that. He is not really slowed down, so I don't want to take anything away from Zadarius. 83 grades each of the last 2 seasons, one with the Vikings, one with the Browns. He's still very, very good. JOK, a little bit younger. Still probably room to improve, but there's a lot of potential in JOK's game, and I love what he brings to the table, his athleticism and versatility. But I think Amari Cooper's consistency would probably bump him up a little bit higher for me.
Yeah, I think Cooper is an underrated wide receiver in the NFL. He feels like a guy that a little bit like that middle tier quarterback contract we always talk about, where Amari Cooper makes every offense he's on immediately better. He's a really good player. He wins at all levels of the field. He earns a big money, not a Justin Jefferson deal, but he earns a big money, reasonably top of the market quarterback or wide receiver contract extension. And then a year or two into that, teams start looking at the deal and looking at Cooper and being like, is he really worth that money? And they move on from him, right? But he's worth it. You might start looking at it and eventually getting annoyed, but he earned that deal. He is worth that money. I don't know. It seems, I think we focus too much on like what separates Amari Cooper from Justin Jefferson instead of like just how good Amari Cooper is. Forget placing him in context relative to the best wide receiver in the NFL. Just appreciate what he's doing for you.
The other guy that I think, deserves more consideration here, I mean, you can only pick three, but Denzel Ward, a bit of a subpar year in 2022, bounced back better last season, and just the totality of Ward's career since 2018, he's been very consistent.
Yeah,
I think missed a ton of time. He missed some time last year, but never played fewer than 700 snaps, and good, solid coverage player.
Yeah, I think for corners, you sort of have to bear in mind the reality of like the position. You know what I mean? The volatility, the
if you're just looking at
inconsistency.
production, but we're talking about this like theoretical level of good.
That's what I mean.
Of which
So,
Denzel Ward needs to be up there.
When you're sort of debating, do you put a corner versus any other position? You just have to bear in mind the inherent volatility and inconsistency at that position. So you can't, you can, but I think it would be a mistake to sort of look at one relative down year for a corner and be like, well, he's not as good as the corresponding wide receiver or guard or whatever. It's just an inherently more volatile, inconsistent position.
And then just Nick Chubb appreciation. The guy's been so good. Big play threat. I mean, I always talk about Saquon Barkley as this big play threat. Hey, if you give him the run blocking, he'll take it to the house. Nick Chubb is kind of like that, but he also adds that element of he's going to maximize bad run blocking as well. So Nick Chubb has just been, I don't want to say underrated. I think we rate him properly, and a lot of people realize when he's healthy, he's unbelievable. But top three type of running back when he's been healthy the last 5-6 years.
I really hope he gets back to something like 100%. I mean, that was such a devastating knee injury. It's the type, I don't want to try to choose your words carefully. It's the type of knee injury that has permanently altered careers, where guys have come back, but they haven't been the same player since. Just hope that isn't the case for Nick Chubb, because he's a special running back.
All right, we're on to the Denver Broncos. We're going team by team in the AFC. Top three players on each team, not necessarily adjusted for position or positional value. Denver Broncos, Patrick Surtain II, Quinn Miners, and Cortland Sutton, also considered Baron Browning and Garrett Bowles by Trevor.
There's another position, or another team rather, where it gets difficult quickly.
Yeah.
Surtain is obvious.
Those are good players. They're all good players. They're deserving, but you're not like, oh, of course, those are the top three, and it's clear, and it's more, they're all superstars.
Yeah, it's more an indication that if those are in your top three, your franchise, your roster doesn't feel that strong.
Yeah, I'd probably consider Bowles a little bit higher. I think he's been really consistent at tackle and really good for a while now. Miners kind of broke out last year, 83-plus grade at guard, and he's probably one of the next guards in line to get paid as well, especially the way that guard market has taken off. And then Surtain, he had a tough season last year because I think the overall grade wasn't good because that defense was just so atrocious early in the year, and it felt like Surtain got beat up by proxy. He was on the field when the Dolphins put up 100 points, right, and 70 points in that game, and he had his blips in there too. But Surtain still on his way to becoming one of the better young corners in the league right now. Yeah,
there are a lot of people out there. I think Devontae Adams said that Surtain, he's the number one corner in the NFL right now. His season last year felt a bit like the Browns the season before last, where their secondary just got eviscerated, not because the secondary was atrocious, but because the defensive line outside of Myles Garrett had nothing, and they were just getting wrecked. Like, if you don't have any pressure, if your defensive front is not making any kind of impact, the corners are kind of sitting ducks. Like in today's NFL, there's only so much you can do as a corner. You're limited by the rules and by everything else. You're going to get picked to pieces. That was what happened, I think, to Surtain last season. He was a victim of Denver's defensive front. But they've made some moves there. And I think, honestly, one of the guys that has a shot to be that third player is John Franklin Myers. He's only just arrived there, but he might be the third best player on the team.
Yeah, and then Courtland Sutton, who you mentioned before, kind of slowly. Look, he had his flashes, he had his moments, had some of those spectacular catches, a couple of really nice connections with Russell Wilson. It does feel like injuries slowed him down a little bit over these last couple of years. It's funny, too, looking at Sutton making $15 million a year, which is now $20 million less than Justin Jefferson. That breaking news looks like it. Some of these receivers who are making $15 to $20 million look like absolute steals relative to the top of the market. Not that they're better, but they're just good, solid players. I think that's where Sutton is at this point in his career, and has a chance to have a lot of targets right now with Jerry Jeudy out and a bunch of guys like Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin and Tim Patrick coming back off injury trying to steal targets on the other side. It looks like Sutton has an opportunity to have another big season. Mm-hmm. All right, done with the Broncos. We're on to the Houston Texans. We got C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and Will Anderson, while Trevor also considered Laramie Tunsil and Derek Stingley Jr.
But did not, at least seemingly, consider Stephon Diggs or Donnell Hunter.
Interesting. The two big off-season additions. Was there other criteria? This wasn't future-based criteria, obviously. Just top three at the moment? I
believe so. Doesn't mention, there's no kind of stipulations on requirements.
Yeah, I mean, this is where Houston is now. Again, in contrast to some of the other teams that we've talked about, there's a good 6 or 7 players because like Tunsil's one of the best left tackles in the NFL.
Tunsil, I think, should be on the list.
Stingley, you talked about, it's a career year. Yeah, he had a career year, but it matched with the draft pedigree, what we thought we saw from him on film at LSU at a peak. Stingley deserves consideration here. Will Anderson, he makes a ton of sense. He stepped right in and, as expected, looked like an impact player as the number 3 overall pick. Nico Collins is the interesting one that, for your previous discussion about coming off a career year like a Matabike, maybe you want to see it one more time before you declare Nico Collins in there.
Yeah, it is interesting, the sort of debate between the veteran that just got brought in and the young player on the roster. So, Nico Collins versus Stephon Diggs. Like, Collins is coming off a career year, a breakout year, by far the best season of his career. He was ascending anyway, but obviously the arrival of C.J. Stroud absolutely turbocharged that and, put him on this crazy pace. Meanwhile, Stephon Diggs is coming off like a bad season relative to his baseline and a bad second half of the bad season. So, and he's, over 30 years old. So you're sort of like, well, is one guy on the rise and the other guy on the way down, or is actually that's the high watermark for Collins, it's the low watermark for Diggs. You're probably going to get something in the middle for both guys, and that would probably lean in Diggs' favor. Like if you sort of split the difference for what you expect each guy to have and what they did last season, you probably end up with a higher baseline, like your middle chart of the bell curve of expectations for each guy. The middle is probably higher for Diggs than it is for Collins if you were doing it that way. And then also with Anderson versus Donnell Hunter, I think Hunter's a better player than Anderson right now. But will that be the case next year? Or, again, is one guy who was very early, obviously, with Will Anderson, is year 2 going to be special and year 3, higher than anything we've seen from Donnell Hunter in his entire career?
I think I'm good with Anderson over Hunter. So interesting breakdown using PFF grades and WAR. Anderson and Hunter very, very close in grade, 81.6 to 78. WAR was very close, 0.27 for Anderson versus 0.22 for Hunter. But Hunter has averaged the same WAR over the last 3 seasons that Will Anderson had in his rookie season last year, right? So basically Will Anderson stepped in as a rookie and provided the same value on the field as Donnell Hunter over the last 3 years. So I understand that. There's a fair conversation between both, but Anderson as a rookie, don't forget, we've seen rookies come in and play really well, and then in year 2, talking about defensive linemen here, J.J. Watt did it. Very good as a rookie. Took off. Soared in year 2. Aaron Donald. Very good as a rookie. Soared in year 2. Aiden Hutchinson, I think similar, right? Second half of rookie season was very good, but year 2, boom, took off. Will Anderson has that opportunity to do that, I believe, this year. So I'm good with Will Anderson. I think there's more of a discussion between Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. I'll admit, I struggle sometimes, Sam, with knowing, how scouts could probably look at, this dude's losing a step, not the same.
Yeah.
Knowing when that older guy, we're talking, in your late 20s.
Right.
When the older player is losing it just a touch. And it doesn't mean that they're never going to be good again, but I struggle with that, right? Like when the Titans traded for Julio Jones a couple years ago, I'm like, of course, it's Julio Jones.
Right.
Even if he loses a step, he'll still be great, but sometimes it's way worse than it feels. I'm not saying that is Stephon Diggs, but it's an interesting discussion between, as you mentioned, the ascending Nico Collins and seemingly leveled off Stephon Diggs.
And even just where the line is in terms of age, for these guys. Like, obviously quarterback has been put into a weird place because of Tom Brady. Rodgers is 40 years old, and there's still just a couple of guys that have been productive at that kind of age. And yet one of them was the most recent guy. In fact, two of them were two of the most recent quarterbacks. So you're like, well, Rodgers could easily play at a top 5 level. Now, the guy that really kind of reset expectations in terms of longevity for wide receivers was Jerry Rice, who stopped playing years ago, right? So we still see wide receiver as this cutoff point at like 30 is the time to start getting worried, right? As opposed to 40. So at that point, you start looking at guys like Stephon Diggs or Keenan Allen or Mike Evans or any of these guys. You're like, they're right at the edge. Any year now is the year they stop being good. But it could easily, in today's world of modern medicine, et cetera, like you could easily have 3-4 more years of high-level Stephon Diggs. And if you get that, he's probably a better bet than Collins.
All right, so, good for the Texans that we're debating this many players, and I think that's why so many people are high on what Houston has going for them this year.
Yep.
All right, staying in the AFC South, we have the Indianapolis Colts. Top 3 players of Michael Pittman Jr., DeForest Buckner, and Quentin Nelson. Trevor also considered Jonathan Taylor, Kenny Moore II, and Bernard Ryman. I think that's a fair top 3.
Yeah, probably. Is there anyone you would definitely put in over those guys?
If you think Jonathan Taylor can get back to form, but we're talking form from a couple years ago, really, for Taylor.
Yeah.
At his best, I think he's definitely in that mix. Quentin Nelson, too, he kind of dropped off a little bit over the last couple years after what looked like an elite Zach Martin-ish type of path as a guard. But I think what you're seeing with Pittman Jr., is he a top, I don't even know if he's a top 10 receiver in the league, but he's solid and good. He just got paid.
Right.
DeForest Buckner's still very effective on a defensive line that has been, kind of hit or miss over the last few years for the Colts. Buckner has been extremely consistent all pretty much not 8 seasons of his career. And then Nelson, I think it's a very fair top 3 for the Colts. The only guy pushing it is if you think Bernard Ryman has this other step to take at left tackle, but I don't think he's knocking off those top 3. It's just Jonathan Taylor, I think, that maybe is in the mix if you think he can get back to form.
I think Buckner is the clear number 1, and after that, I think there's a discussion everywhere. But Buckner would be the number 1 guy by a distance for me. And then, Michael Pittman, Kenny Moore, Jonathan Taylor, definitely probably 3 offensive linemen. Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Bernard Ryman, maybe even Braden Smith. Like, this is an offensive line that should be really good and hasn't been necessarily throughout the entire time.
They were much better last year. It was the 22 season that was disastrous with a lot of the injuries and everything.
Right.
Last year they only struggled when Blake Freeland had to come in.
Yeah,
for a little bit.
It's not a good endorsement for the
Don't bring it up.
It's not good.
It's a good top 3 for the Colts. It's a solid roster. I think it has been for a few years now. Solid players in their top 3. Anthony Richardson has a chance to jump in. Is he gonna have the year 2 breakout? A lot of hype for Richardson.
Yeah.
Going into year 2. I'm looking forward to seeing what he did. There was a lot of good there, but some inconsistency as well.
And like worst case scenario in terms of we have athletic freak show of a quarterback. Oh no, he broke his shoulder to pieces after like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the first injury that he had in 4 weeks. Like if you're going to use a quarterback as a significant part of your design run game, the absolute worst thing that can happen is twice in the space of 4 weeks he gets injuries, and now you're like, oh no, can he even do that? Or do we have to remodel Anthony Richardson as a prototypical pocket passer in an offseason when he's barely played the position, ever? That's not an easy call now for the Colts.
Remains to be seen. But yeah, I think that's a good list for the Colts. Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Josh Allen, Travis Etienne, and Trevor Lawrence. Top 3 from Trevor. Foye Oluokun, Tyson Campbell, and Eric Armstead all considered. I think for me, it's more Armstead versus Etienne, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think I'd
there.
have Etienne in my top 3.
Etienne.
I mean, I don't think I would have him in my top 3.
Yeah, that's fine. Trevor Lawrence, the stats aren't great, Sam.
Lawrence should be there.
Yeah, of course.
He's good. He's not. He hasn't shown great. I mean, again, remember, you just need to kind of place into context what happened last year for Trevor Lawrence. The first half of the year, he was let down at a ridiculous level by the receiving talent around him. In the second half of the year, he's hurt. So in both halves of the season, were not a fair reflection on what Trevor Lawrence actually is. The first half, the performance was better than the stats. The second half, the performance wasn't as good, but because he was hurt, not because that's who he is.
Still see a lot of Jags fans. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, Sam. With the Trayvon Walker discussion.
10 sacks, Steve. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean, as far as getting quick, consistent pressure, Josh Allen was it last year for the Jags. And Trayvon Walker, his athleticism does help with tracking down Bryce Young on a cleanup sack, different things like that. But the impact that Walker has had is not I
forget what it was.
In the 10 sacks, and he is. I've also heard he's an elite run defender.
Yes. Yeah.
That is
double-digit sacks and an elite run defender. What are you talking about?
There were points in 2022 where he was, and I said the best thing he does is when he plays head up on a tight end, he wrecks them. He beats up on tight ends.
Yeah.
That's not a knock on Trayvon Walker. Like, that's your job. You're supposed to do that. He does well with that. He is not an elite run defender all around right now. So I don't want to get that's it.
No, it's not it. The highest PFF single game run defending grade of his season last year was 72.6.
I was going to say 72.
He had 3 grades that were above 65, and his overall grade in terms of run defense for the season was 49.7. For the most athletic like a built in a lab edge rusher / defensive lineman, 11 sacks is just not a good reflection of what he was last season. It is an example. It's a Vic Beasley season. It's an example of how sometimes sacks can bounce your way, even though you're not actually that great rushing the passer. And then, you might say, even if you want to ignore that, but he's an elite run defender. Okay, he just isn't. There's no evidence for that. He might be on a given play here or there where he, again, a bit like Vita Vea, where his highlight reel might look spectacular. But where's the rest of it? Like, if Vita Vea did what he can do to guards on a regular basis, there would be no question about who the best defensive lineman in the NFL is. It would be Vita Vea. We would be like, nobody can do that. Aaron Donald couldn't do that. He is the best defensive lineman in football and maybe of all time.
I just wanted to touch on it.
But quickly. That isn't the reality of his season.
Wanted to touch on it quickly.
We touched on it. It's done.
I would go, so I like Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence. I'd throw Eric Armstead in there because I think he is still legit. I think he can rush from the interior or the edge. He will help that defensive line. He will help Trayvon Walker. And maybe Walker will get a bunch of sacks as well because they do have some help, even more help this year. ETN kind of fringe there for me. Tyson Campbell's another interesting one. Like a lot of corners. Skill is there, but the production tends to fluctuate just a little bit.
I'd be tempted to put Oluokun in as my third.
Okay. Good one. Kansas City Chiefs. It's probably the easiest one.
Yeah.
Although there are some challengers now, younger challengers, but the easiest ones. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones. You've got your big three, your cornerstones of the Super Bowl runs. However, ascending right now, Trent McDuffie and Creed Humphrey.
Yeah, I think the only way you change this trio is if you believe Travis Kelce is on the decline. I mean, last season was not the best season It was a marked step backwards for Travis Kelce. Now he still showed up big, at critical moments.
It'd be a bigger story if he didn't turn it on again in the playoffs and didn't look less athletic in the playoffs. He looked fine. Like, there was points last year where he looked a little bit less athletic. He battled injuries early on. So did he just get healthy down the stretch? Or do you say, well, as you get older, you're always going to be battling injuries, therefore that's part of your future here heading into year 12?
I mean, his playoffs was elite. It was as good as anybody again. So if he's that guy again, and either he just had, an injury-marred season or whatever, or just a slow year. Like, if he's the playoff guy again, we're fine. If, however, last season was the start of his decline significantly, and again, we talk wide receiver, 30 is the year where you start getting twitchy. Travis Kelce's going to be 35 this season. And now he's dealing with, jet setting around the world connected to Taylor Swift. Like, his priorities are elsewhere, perhaps.
So jet lag.
Jet lag. Deal
with age and jet lag.
We talk all the time, right? You got to look, where's this game happening? This is a cross-country trip. Look, Travis Kelce's around the world. Look at the air miles he's not knocking up. Now, okay, they're on a private jet, so maybe they don't have the same impact as the air miles that you or I rack up from coach, hoping that you get the exit aisle or whatever, right? I'm just saying, it's a factor.
Trent McDuffie. So Creed Humphrey, by the way, since stepping in as the starting center, heading into year 4, I believe it is now, one of the best centers in the NFL, extremely durable, good run blocker, good pass protector. Creed Humphrey deserves that mention. Any other team, he's probably in the top 3. He's been that good at center. And then McDuffie really broke out last year. And McDuffie's just an interesting story, too, because he's part of that Hall post-Tyreek Hill and, the trade with the Dolphins. And McDuffie with L'Jarius Sneed leaving. If you were ranking this for last year, you'd consider L'Jarius Sneed and how much man coverage and press they play and how difficult McDuffie and Sneed make it for opposing teams to just throw the ball down the field. So you lose Sneed, but McDuffie's still there. Maybe does he take on a bigger role playing outside a little bit more? We'll see. But, yeah, McDuffie deserves a lot of love here. Mm-hmm. But a clear big 3 for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah.
Good?
Yep.
Las Vegas Raiders. We had Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, and Colton Miller as the third one. I think when you look at Devontae Adams still at this point in his career, Max Crosby, absolutely. Colton Miller has been an underrated, really good left tackle over the last 4 or 5 years. There's your top 3 for the Raiders. Also, Trevor also considered Malcolm Kuntz, who had a breakout 2023 season, did supply very good pass rush production opposite Max Crosby. That was unexpected, but really needed for the Raiders. Beyond that, though, no one really else in consideration here for the Raiders.
Yeah, no, I think they're another one of the fairly clear big 3. So yeah, I think that's the right group. Was there anyone else you would even throw into the conversation? I mean, somebody in the chat mentioned at some point, are rookies eligible for this? Sure, but I don't think many of them will. I don't think any of them maybe will hit that mark. But
realistically, you're not gonna. I mean, there'll be some rookies. Who was drafted this year? That was months ago.
I don't know that any rookie is going to hit the top 3 players on their franchise right out of the gate. But if you believe Brock Bowers is like genuinely, transcendently special, you would at least maybe mention him.
Like, who's the cleanest?
Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison would be the one.
He did make it. He did make it for Arizona.
Okay. So he'd be the one guy.
I was going to say Laiatu Latu for us.
Probably not.
Probably not surpassing anybody on the Colts just right away.
Maybe, but like, there's probably only 3 or 4 guys you would even mention as options. Latu,
Byron Murphy and the Seahawks. I'm just trying to think of not a quarterback is almost certainly never going to make it.
Right. It's Marvin Harrison, Brock Bowers,
Malik
Latu.
Neighbors and the Giants. Possibly.
Maybe Latu.
Did he?
Maybe Neighbors.
Did he do that?
It's not a big list anyway.
No, Neighbors wouldn't make it with the Giants. Yeah. Right. So I mean, they're in consideration. Spoiler for Thursday that you could also read on PFF.com right now. But yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. will be there for the Cardinals. So yeah, the Raiders. I mean, it's a good top 3 as we mentioned. Colton Miller. You always mention like the one big hit of the Mayock era. Was the Mayock? It was right before Mayock.
No, it was the one year that it was just Gruden, no Mayock.
One of the big first-round hits that the Raiders have had in the last 10 years. One of the only. Crosby's one of the best edges in the league, and Devontae Adams, even a declining Devontae Adams, is still really effective. He's dealt with some injuries at quarterback and some inconsistency there, but still can produce.
And Adams is now becoming that guy on that age precipice, right? How old is he?
32?
31 now. Be 32. It's late in the season.
He's the one that I picture, like when I was joking about the Titans trading for Julio Jones a few years ago, thinking, of course that's fine.
Right.
He's declining, but there's still something there. It's tough to know if there's like a decline where it's still really productive or if it's a steep decline. Like Randy Moss all of a sudden looked like he just couldn't do anything in the NFL out of nowhere. And Julio had elements of that.
Well, it's very difficult, I think, to know even once you've, like, number one, when is the decline actually happening versus like this is just a relative down year. Like, is Stephon Diggs declining, or did he just have a bad season that ended badly last year? And because he's 30, we're like, that's it. Diggs is done. It's time to wrap it up. Go home. And then once you've established, okay, he is in fact declining. We've reached the point where we are getting a worse version of him every single year until we finally hang up the cleats. How is this player going to decline into old age? Because I would have been convinced early in his career that Randy Moss would actually decline extremely well, because worst case scenario, you are still developing into this amazing jump ball guy down the field and red zone target. And you can hang on like that for another 5 years. Like the way
even the Randy ratio stuff where he was more of a possession guy.
Yeah.
It was like he could work the middle of the field enough if he wanted to. Like he could do that.
But Larry Fitzgerald aged extremely gracefully, right? He became an amazing possession receiver when obviously early in his career he was so much more than that. So he aged extremely well. I would have been convinced that Randy Moss would have had 5 years at the end of his career where he couldn't do the kind of crazy stuff that he did earlier, but you were still getting basically Mike Williams, right? Really good vertical threat because he can still, long speed is still there. He may have lost the explosion and the devastating short area stuff, but he can still run by you once he's running because he's taken those 8 feet long strides, right? And then he's still a great jump ball guy and red zone threat and all those kinds of things. Instead, it was like Randy Moss, once he reached the declining phase of his career, just forgot how to football. And it was like he went from amazing to done almost immediately. So, that's part of it. Is he declining? And then if so, yes, the next stage on the flow chart, does it fall off a cliff or do we age gracefully here?
And my point on Davante Adams is I believe he's declined a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, would we have felt that as much if he was still playing with a healthy Aaron Rodgers?
Right.
Would we have felt it? But I don't think 3 years ago, Davante Adams was the clear top receiver in the NFL for about 2 or 3 years in a row. I don't think he's that anymore, but he's still really good and really effective, right? So it's not the cliff for Davante. So he deserves the love here. All right, let's go Los Angeles Chargers. We have Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater, and Khalil Mack, while considering Derwin James, Joey Bosa, Asante Samuel Jr. I think Derwin James and Khalil Mack would be the discussion here.
We're just jinxing the man left, right, and center today.
I thought we said we're just going to start naming them.
Okay.
We're just going
to
go
re-earn the jinx.
I'm interested to see what happens with the new Jesse Minter defense, right? The defense that accentuates the positives of the defensive players, that the Kyle Hamiltons of the world look like do-it-all playmakers.
Yeah.
And if Derwin James can get back to that. Because I don't know that he's lost a step or lost physical ability so much as the Brandon Staley defense just didn't have the kind of impact that we thought it would a few years ago.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns with this roster, I think. In this defense, the new defense, Asante Samuel Jr. is moving in the right direction. Does he take a big jump in this defense and suddenly starts looking like an elite level top corner shutdown guy? The Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack thing, Khalil Mack's getting on. Joey Bosa's dealt with a lot of injuries. If those two guys are both at their best, they're probably number 2 and 3 on the list. It's Herbert, then the 2 defensive linemen. But I don't know that you can bank on that for either guy. Mack is just reaching that age, and Joey Bosa's just been so beat up. I don't know if you can rely on getting that guy. Slater, I think, is a fair call for one of those spots. I wonder, is Joe Alt special enough that the rookie list we talked about before, is he on that short list of guys that could at least be in the discussion?
I was thinking, if he went, I was going to say that if he went to the Titans, but they just added a whole bunch of high-end type of players. But yeah, if he went to a different team, if he went to the Giants,
right.
But Alt isn't in the mix yet for the Chargers here.
Yeah, probably not. So, and then, as you say, Derwin James is the other guy on the list.
Yeah, the Khalil Mack one's interesting as we talk about older players declining. He's the one from a production standpoint. If you just look at his 2021 with the Bears, 73 grade, his first time anywhere not near 90 in his career. That was in 21. In 22, he was in low 70s again. And remember the first 3 weeks of the season last year, I was like, man, Khalil Mack's got an issue. He's not rushing the passer well. And then all of a sudden he sacks Aiden O'Connell 6 times in week 4. And I was still thinking, well, maybe he's just beating up on the bad Raiders and it's O'Connell holding the ball too long. But the rest of Mack's season was really solid. It was really good. He kind of got back to form. So I think Mack being this guy, the number 3 guy here, I think is fair still for the Chargers. And Joey Bosa is the one I'm a little bit more concerned about given the production dip he's had plus the injuries over the last couple of years. But I think Derwin bounces back here this year.
Okay.
Before getting hurt. Who's next? Miami Dolphins.
Miami.
Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Tua is where Trevor went here.
Uh-oh. It's a bad time for the depth charts to stop loading.
Oh, I think it's not my responsibility anymore, but somebody needs to figure out. It's like when you're in the session too long.
Before you
fill your cookies.
Before you leave that side, you need to leave on a Post-it note somewhere. Like whatever you do, keep the depth charts working at all times.
Keep them working at all times. Yeah. Also considered here, big list for the Dolphins: Teron Armstead, Jalen Ramsey, Jalen Phillips, Devon Achane. What did he say it was? And Javon Holland. Achane. You're
telling me I got to log out of this thing and come back in?
Might help. It might help. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and I think for me it's a debate between maybe Tua and Jalen Ramsey, Jalen Phillips.
It's interesting because what do you do with Tua, who within this very specific set of circumstances has shown that he can be a very high-level quarterback, operating the offense to an extremely high level. But do you kind of recognize that that actually he's kind of a product of that?
No, I mean, look, there's truth in both. I think Tua deserves a ton of credit. I think a bigger issue that I have is not so much that, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike McDaniel in the offense help the overall production from Tua. Let's just give him all of the production credit for a minute.
Okay.
It's more about doing it against good teams, doing it, do I have any faith in Tua going to Kansas City again in the playoffs or going to Buffalo even in the playoffs, like in the cold weather and everything? Do you have any faith in that going forward? Maybe at some point they just kind of get over that hump. But I think you're battling that versus some of the, Jalen Ramsey getting a little bit older but still being really good, or a Jalen Phillips who looks like he's ready to break out and become one of the more consistent pass rushers in the league. So that's just the debate as far as the top 3 goes. So I don't want to get into Tua's value.
Okay, so we'll give Tua full credit for his production. Then he's one of the 3. I think Tyreek Hill is clearly the number 1 guy, and then the debate is the third guy that you put in that list. Is it Jalen Waddle? Is it Jalen Phillips? I mean, Teron Armstead should be there, except what's the discount you give him for the 75% of the season you're going to get from him?
3 different guys named Jalen with different spellings.
Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, and Jalen
Ramsey.
Oh. And then Armstead, though, I think should be in that conversation as well. Like, I don't know what the discount rate you give him for knowing that he's going to miss a quarter of the season.
Injuries are annoying enough that we can't put him up there.
But he's another one of those guys that, on the field, he's a top 5 left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those teams where there's so many options here because of the depth that they've added. I think the Dolphins have done a really good job of building the team on this rookie contract for Tua and going and getting Tyreek Hill and getting Jalen Ramsey and Teron Armstead, all those guys.
Probably doesn't quite.
While also developing some from within.
Yeah, Javon Holland as an option. He probably doesn't quite crack the list, but you should at least, I think,
deserves
give him
a shout out for being good.
Yeah, Javon Holland, but also I think another guy in that category doesn't quite crack the list, but at least should be mentioned and sort of given kudos for even being in the conversation. Zach Sealer. Zach Sealer's gone from, was he an undrafted guy from like Ferris State or something, to worked his way onto a roster, into the rotation, into a starting position, and just every step of the way has justified it and played better and better. He's kind of like a defensive line equivalent of TJ Edwards, where you have to do it the hard way, but he's just a good player. And the more opportunity you give him, the more you see that he's a good player.
Would you put Bradley Chubb in this conversation? Don't forget, he got hurt, and didn't. Like that was a big impact for Miami. He's coming off of his career year.
I guess he's in the same conversation as Sealer and Javon Holland, which is you're probably not cracking the top 3, but you should at least get a mention. And to be fair, I guess Shaquille Barrett would be in that group as well. They've got.
It shows what they've done, man. I mean, I'm trying not to overrate what we saw last year. Was when they ran up against some of the better teams and then trying to make that playoff run. It felt like they were just lacking.
But when you contrast that to Buffalo. We just ran through like 10 players for the Dolphins that could easily make that number 3, and they're all good. Whereas for Buffalo, it's like we're struggling to find the third guy, and if the guys we're finding are like slot corner, edge, like underachieving defensive linemen of some description, like it's not.
Easy. Matt Milano and
then
Greg Rousseau
injured
could have
linebacker,
been 6th or 7th on the Dolphins list, or 7th or 8th on the Dolphins list. So. We'll see if it matters. But, yeah, it's impressive by the Dolphins from a team-building standpoint to just see all the different options that they have here. All right, let's go New England Patriots. Top 3 players. We have Matthew Judon, Kyle Duggar, and Jabril Peppers. Also considering Michael Onwenu.
Yikes.
Yeah. So, Kyle Duggar got paid this offseason, versatile safety. Jabril Peppers, I keep saying, if the Patriots were good, right? If this was the Belichick era, the Brady era, really, Patriots, you would be saying Bill Belichick did it again. Jabril Peppers, had a solid career. He was fine, but really found his way. They really used him properly.
I mean, he would be the new Patrick Chung.
He'd be the new Patrick Chung, right? Like role player, got the most out of him. Couldn't do it elsewhere, but he's doing it here in New England. And so that still exists, but it doesn't matter because everything else is not good in New England. So credit for Jabril Peppers and the way he's turned things around. Matthew Judon, I don't think he's as good as maybe people in New England think he is. Again, it's a sack total type of thing, but he's a good, solid player. I know Belichick loved him. Assignment-driven player, does what he's asked. Very good player. But that's what these guys are. Good players, not really impact players for the Patriots.
Did you see the tweet that Peppers put out there? What was it, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago?
Did not. I don't think.
So he quote tweeted somebody. The initial tweet was from somebody called Wrong Opinion Man, who said, "Remember when the Browns had Jabril Peppers lined up like this every single day?" And it was a picture of the Greg Williams defense where he's lined up literally 30 yards from the line of scrimmage.
Lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Literally 30 yards from the line of scrimmage as a deep lying middle of the field free safety. And Jabril Peppers quote tweeted and say, "My bro just sent this and I needed someone to help me understand. How can you watch my college film, draft me, just to keep me 30 yards away from the line of scrimmage all game?"
It's a fair question.
It really is. I mean, the Greg Williams safety deployment was always wild, but to do it specifically to somebody like Jabril Peppers was another level of special.
Oh, I love that. That's great. So a couple other players that I think deserve mention here for the Patriots. Christian Barmore, I think, has a very good case for being in this top 3. I think he's one of the next defensive tackles to get paid. He finally took that next step, I think, that we expected as a potential top 10 player in the draft a few years ago and landed in the second round. Barmore is very good.
He got paid.
Oh, he did get paid. That's right.
4-year, $92 million extension.
I thought he did, and I saw, my depth chart's not up to date.
4-year, $84 million extension, depending on where you look. So
so Barmore.
He got paid anyway.
And then Christian Gonzalez.
I was gonna bring him up. I didn't want to, be too much of a slave to my priors. I was gonna bring up Christian Gonzalez and ask, have we seen enough in the 7 minutes of play that he played to say, is he one of the best 3 players?
It's enough to say that with the size and movement skills, draft pedigree, and what we saw a little bit on the field from Christian Gonzalez, that he'll be in this discussion going forward here for the Patriots.
Okay.
So I think it's a group of solid players, nothing super flashy. It's not like, again, the Dolphins with probably 7 stars that we're debating between here in New England. It's more like 5 solid players that you're debating for their top.
What would your 3 be? Onwenu for me would definitely be on the 3.
I'd probably go Judon, Barmore, and Christian Gonzalez.
Wow. I think I would have Judon, Onwenu, and Barmore.
Yeah, I'd probably put Onwenu over Duggar. I don't know. It's close.
Maybe. I
I
mean,
like
another guy.
Onwenu, though. He deserves. We've talked him up a ton here.
Right.
Just his ability to play tackle and guard and do it really well.
And in particular tackles where he's been at his best.
Yeah.
And one last name I think to shout out, I guess, would be Jonathan Jones at corner, who's always sort of consistently outperformed expectation.
Again, it's a team of solid players. It'll be interesting to see in the Drake May era. We're lauding the Vikings for not only finding Justin Jefferson but paying him a ton of money, and that coinciding with the rookie contract quarterback. Will the Patriots be able to find those shiny objects to complement all these solid players here? All right, let's go New York Jets. Top 3 from Trevor here. It's a good one. Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, and Garrett Wilson. While also considering Aaron Rodgers and Breece Hall.
Yeah. This is a really good list. Like, they have options. I mean,
Yeah.
dude, look at the players you can.
Again, this isn't impact. This is like obviously Aaron Rodgers is the most important player here, right? The Jets had all of these guys last year. Quinnen, Sauce, Garrett Wilson. Couldn't do a thing because the quarterback play was awful. We're not talking about impact leading to wins. We're saying position agnostic, best players on the team. And it's fair to say Rodgers, who's going to have the biggest impact, might not be a top 3 player if we're not adjusting for position just because of how good some of these other guys are.
I mean, I think Quinnen and Sauce are locked in. I think those are the 2 locks. I think I would still have Rodgers as my 3rd guy.
Yeah.
Like,
by the way, I'm
obviously-
not saying it's not debatable.
Obviously he's the most valuable. Like, nothing matters on this
of course.
roster if Rodgers gets hurt after 4 snaps again. But again, it's like, what are your expectations for Aaron Rodgers? Okay, 40 years old, coming off an Achilles is a bad starting point. But we are not that far removed from a still old Aaron Rodgers being back-to-back MVP. Like, that's his capability, even at this point, I think. Physically, I said this last week as well, and it sounded stupid, but like, there's been no sign of physical decline from Aaron Rodgers other than the fact that a part of his body snapped in half the last time we saw him on a football field.
Well, there's 2 ways of looking at physical decline. It was the thing I said about the Travis Kelce a little while ago. Does a healthy player look different?
Right.
Or because he's older, is he more injury prone?
So it's the Brett Favre dynamic, right? Like, Brett Favre, I think right now could go out there and have a top 10 NFL arm.
Still could
like,
chuck it.
You know, at like 50 years of old, straight off the tractor, like whatever the hell Brett Favre's doing with his time these days, other than, you know, potentially legally troubling things. Brett Favre, like, I think never physically declined from that point of view. He still looked completely able to sling it, but where the physical decline manifested in Brett Favre's case is he stopped being built like granite, you know? Hits that didn't used to be a problem earlier in his career, or at least he could just tape up and play through, started to mound up, and the body broke down. So is that what we're seeing with Aaron Rodgers, where right up until his final play, he's going to be able to go out there and fire Caleb Williams, Patrick Mahomes-esque passes all around the yard, but stuff's going to start snapping again, right? There was an Achilles last time. Maybe this time it'll be a knee or an elbow or a wrist. Like, stuff is just going to start breaking down on the man. Or was he just unlucky? Like, people tear Achilles all the time. Like, healthy, young players tear Achilles. Like, did we just get an unlucky thing that happened to Rodgers on bad turf? I don't know. But my expectation for Rodgers this season, again, the middle chart of my bell curve, I think probably exceeds Garrett Wilson, maybe Breece Hall. Tyron Smith is another name to throw in there.
I was going to throw Tyron in there. I mean, if we're talking Teron Armstead.
DJ Reed, Hassan Reddick. I mean, there's a lot of options for the Jets.
Yeah.
Both linebackers, Williams and Mosley.
It's interesting because I don't think any of those guys really challenge Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, or Garrett Wilson, or Aaron Rodgers. They don't challenge them for the top 3.
Breece Hall could, I think.
I don't think they challenge them for the top 3 or 4. But the top 10 might be as good as any in the league. Top 8.
And Tyron Smith,
the Jets is up there with any team in the league right now.
Tyron Smith has the same. It's the Teron Armstead conversation again.
For
like,
sure.
Healthy Tyron Smith is probably still top 3 left tackles in the
Tyron
NFL.
looked good last year, right? We were giving him credit for like, hey, we haven't seen him look.
That was his best season
like
in years.
This in a while,
right?
Yeah,
because it was his least injured season in years. But like, even last year, he still missed time.
That's that same debate we're talking about, right? He's banged up a lot.
Yeah.
Misses some time. Hasn't missed a bunch, like full seasons. But Tyron Smith's banged up enough that it affects his performance.
Well, the difference between him, I think, and Armstead is it's the same conversation as a starting point, which is you are going to miss time, like guaranteed. You would the odds on him missing some time injured this year would be wildly minus money. But the difference, I think, between him and Armstead is you don't know how much. With Armstead, it's a fairly consistent 25% of the season. You're going to miss about 4 games every year for Teron Armstead. With Tyron Smith, it could be 1 game or it could be like 15. It could be anything. You just don't know with Tyron Smith.
All right. Jets are loaded, man.
Yeah.
With good players. By the way, just we talked about Patrick Surtain a little while ago, Sauce Gardner. I think those guys have a chance to reset the cornerback market in a couple of years. The cornerback market feels a little suppressed the last few seasons, and we've theorized on that. Is it they're playing more zone, less reliant? To me, it's just the lack of big names and clear top corners. I think Sauce and Surtain, the clear top young corners, or at least 2 of them, that will help reset the market and get the cornerback. What's going to happen is they're going to get paid, and then the narrative is going to be like, see, teams have to Justin Jefferson's making all this money, and now the teams have to start paying the corners, when it's really just like we finally have, I think, 2 corners to kind of hang your hat on and say, these are the best guys going forward. I think Sauce absolutely in that mix, as is Surtain.
I think it's also a product of what we talked about before, just that volatility at the position. Like wide receiver, it's easy to stack 4 seasons back to back to back to back that are all elite, and you're like, okay, there are no questions. I have
we know who this guy is.
There's no red flag. There's no concerning data point here. It's just this. He's amazing. He's deserving of the Justin Jefferson contract. It's almost impossible for a cornerback to do that. Like you just can't. So almost inevitably, anybody coming to the market is either coming off a career year, but they weren't there the year before, or coming off a bad year, but the year before they had an amazing season. And you're sort of like debating internally while you're like, are we willing to reset the market for a guy that's got a concerning season, let's say, somewhere in the last 2 years of his resume?
All right, we got 2 more teams left in the AFC, and then we'll hit the NFC on Thursday. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers and then the Tennessee Titans. For the Steelers, T.J. Watt, Cameron Hayward, and Minkah Fitzpatrick, with a consideration for Alex Highsmith, all defensive players for the Steelers. Are we forgetting a little bit about George Pickens in this mix here?
I was going to say, no love for George Pickens.
So clearly T.J. Watt. Hayward's an interesting one. He's heading into year 14.
Yeah.
We just did a watch-along from way back, the 2011 draft, which is back on YouTube, by the way. The 2011 NFL draft watch-along. If you did not sit and watch that with us, go check it out.
There's a little it's a little tick in the plus column for Tyler, So he made us late today. But he got the watch along.
Saved us from getting sued and got our YouTube.
Wait, I don't think he did that, but he got the thing back on YouTube. Anyway.
Back on YouTube.
So Cameron Hayward is a good example. Like he's a defensive line equivalent of the Stephon Diggs thing, right? Coming off a bad year, injured last season. Was that his decline? I mean, Hayward is 35 now, but I think all of the best seasons of his career have come post 30. So have we reached the point where Hayward is on the way down, or did he just get hurt last year and not play his best football, and next year at 35, you're still going to get an elite defensive lineman?
Calais Campbell comes to mind with Hayward, a guy like a similar career path where maybe the best work was in the 30s, close to the mid-30s, and Campbell slowed down a little bit, was still really good and effective, though.
Yeah.
So I think Hayward has more in the tank, but is it enough? Like he's a little upset with his contract. I mean, he wants to be a Steeler for life and get paid for it. I'm still willing to give him that credit, though, because I'm a name value guy, right? Stick with the name value. And, Bill Belichick was always lauded for getting out a year early. I'd be the stay a year late.
Every time.
I'd be a year late guy. So I'm willing to still buy into Cameron Hayward. And Minkah Fitzpatrick, a good all-around safety. The only other offensive players, as we mentioned, George Pickens, especially now, maybe as the clear one. We might see even bigger breakout season here for Pickens.
And theoretically an upgrade at the quarterback position, regardless of which guy it is throwing him the football. They should be better than Kenny Pickett, who did not play to the strengths of George Pickens.
Oversimplifying George Pickens' season last year. Remember, even in the preseason, I think he took like a 5-yard pass, brought it 70 yards to the house, and it was like, that's a new part of his game, right? The speed, and he started to do that during the regular season as well, had a few big plays. But as we always talked about, the contested catch results tend to fluctuate, and we saw that in Pickens' game. But he actually may have been a better receiver last year. Now, there were some out there that said he was more talented than Justin Jefferson, which is ridiculous. But Pickens looked like a little bit more explosive, looked like he'd add more after the catch, and if you get that year where he's catching everything in traffic and, in tight situations like he does, you could have that special season for Pickens.
Yeah, to sort of bank you up with the justification of sticking with Hayward for one more year, it might have been like if Hayward didn't have the history of playing his best football north of 30, I think it would be an easier argument to make that, hey, jump ship, it's done, he's hit the decline, it's time to go. Like Highsmith, particularly, as an obvious alternative. Like you would go, hey, Highsmith's better. He's younger. He's shown an elite season. It's time to move. Like we go off one elite player, go into another one. But literally the 4 best seasons of Hayward's career have all come after the age of 30, including all of the most recent ones, like his age 34 season.
His 6 best seasons have been 2017 through 22.
Yeah.
And then his 3 best or his 4 best,
right,
as you mentioned, were the last 4.
So his age 34 season was the one sort of injured, not great year last year. But age 33, elite. Age 32, elite. Age 31, elite. Age 30, elite. If he hadn't done that, I think it would be an easier argument to make. I just don't see that he hit a wall at 35 that wasn't there at 34, and now you say, all right, it's time. We're out.
Yeah, I think we think too much in hitting the wall, even though it does happen in the NFL. It is. I think it's harder to predict than people think.
Yeah, it happens, and I think it's real. But I think the default position is always, oh, that's it. So
I think it's also okay if you're a team to simply cut it off and be consistent with it. And say, he still might be good. He still might be good,
yes,
but we're just not going to be the one that incurs that risk.
Yeah, it's an absolutely reasonable rule of thumb to take. But it's like we had this conversation for years with Andrew Whitworth, right? So Whitworth pushed that age boundary for like half a decade, right? And the point is, once you reach a certain point, you're on the lookout for any sign of decline. So as soon as you see a bad game or a bad month or a bad season, you're like, that's it, time, quick, done. There it is. There is the decline. We've been waiting for it for a while, and there it is. We've finally seen it. But if it was just like you're looking for patterns that might not actually exist, because players, no matter how good they are, have bad weeks or bad months or even bad seasons. And when they're 28, you don't care. It's just that was a bad year or a bad period, right? When they're 38, you're like, well, that's it. That's the decline. It's hit. There it is. 2 + 2 = 4. I need to know no more information. But you are just as likely, I think, or maybe slightly less likely, to be ascribing what is just normal fluctuations in play to decline simply because there's an extra element there of age that you're aware of.
I think that's all fair. All right, wrapping up the AFC with the Tennessee Titans.
Didn't forget them.
We did not. Someone was asking. We did not forget the Titans. They were just last alphabetically in the AFC. We may have forgotten someone else today because I was simply scrolling. I'll check. Jeffrey Simmons, DeAndre Hopkins, and L'Jarius Sneed.
It's happened before. It'll probably happen again.
Thoughts on the Titans list here? Calvin Ridley could be in consideration here, especially if you think he might surpass Hopkins with the whole age thing that we keep talking about. But pretty solid list here for the Titans.
Yep, I think Simmons is definitely one of them. I think Sneed is got to be the second, even though he's just arrived. I think it probably is Hopkins as the third. I don't think. I mean, even if you're just choosing between the 2 wide receivers, I don't think you can put Ridley over Hopkins even with age yet. I mean, Hopkins showed he can still cook.
Hopkins similar to the Devontae Adams thing, where now 5 or 6 years removed, where Nuke was the best receiver in the NFL, and pretty clearly. He's not that. He's not maybe even top 5, but still really, really good. And so his decline has been slower, which means he's still effective. Yeah. So I think in this top 3, Nuke Hopkins perfectly fine here.
Yeah, I mean, he showed last year. Like he put up 1,000 yards last season, 7 touchdowns with a combination of terrible quarterback play, generally, right? Yeah. Even Will Levis, who flashed positivity or optimism going forward, it was really just one game where he looked great, and then the rest of it was more entertainment value than it was high-quality play. It's like, all right, there's a great throw in here, and then, oh, my God, what is he doing running the ball like that? It wasn't exactly like that was helping Nuke Hopkins, and yet he looked really good.
Simmons is the other interesting one I'm looking at here. Remember, he's had games where it feels like he just takes over. Was it the Rams Super Bowl year where he was just unblockable against the Rams Sunday Night Football, and it's like, hey, this is what Jeffrey Simmons does every week. He's never had that elite 90-plus PFF grade, but always felt capable of
Yeah.
it. And I wonder how much that is, playing out of position at times. He's maybe played more nose tackle certain seasons than you would want. Will T'Vondre Sweat coming in help free him up just a little bit? Because I have always thought Simmons is very, very good, but could be even better, maybe with a little better supporting cast. You might see that production even better from Simmons.
Yeah, Simmons. So Vita Vea is always my hobby horse for guys that have potential to be way better than they actually are. Like the highlight reel you can cobble together for Vita Vea would be the best highlight reel for any defensive lineman. Forget interior player, but any defensive lineman in the NFL. And it would stack up like all time. Vita Vea's highlight reel would be perfectly at home right there with Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White in terms of just, dude, this is ridiculous. But he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it over full games, let alone over the course of 1,000 snaps over his full season. Jeffrey Simmons is like that, but almost on a per game basis. Like he actually has games that look overwhelming and dominant and unstoppable, and then he just doesn't do it for full seasons the way Quinnen Williams or Chris Jones or Aaron Donald did before he retired. And with Simmons, what makes it interesting is from day one in the NFL, he's done that, right? Remember, they drafted him in the first round despite coming off a knee injury. So he didn't debut until week 7 in his rookie season. That debut earned him a 90.6 PFF game grade with 3 total pressures, 3 defensive stops. Right out of the gate, guy coming off a knee injury as a rookie, you're like, he's amazing. That guy is going to be incredible. And then there was 2 more good games that season, and everything else was below average. That was the only game that year where he had more than 1 pressure.
Yep.
And that's kind of been who he's been for his career, where you get these games where you're his best games, if you stack them all next to each other, he would be the best defensive tackle in the NFL. Or he'd be right there with Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, Quinnen Williams, etc. He just doesn't do it as often as those other guys.
And for the record, I think he is up in that mix. Well paid, should be well paid. He is up in that. He deserves to be with Quinnen and Dexter Lawrence, probably a tick below those, some of those guys.
Yeah.
And I've always been a Jeffrey Simmons fan. Remember when he came out, it was him and Ed Oliver in the same draft class. I liked Simmons. I don't know where the final ranking was. I liked Simmons ahead of Oliver for a while, even though Ed Oliver was kind of like the consensus. He's going to go top 3 or top 5. I've always liked Simmons. So still always just looking for a little bit more from him, but clear top 3 player for the Titans and a good list having Jeffrey Simmons, DeAndre Hopkins, and L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah, not a ton of other options that you would throw out there. I mean, we mentioned
Calvin Ridley. I mentioned.
Yeah.
Trevor mentioned Harold Landry. I don't think they cracked the top 3 though.
No, Amani Hooker, maybe we're in that kind of category of probably doesn't crack your top 3, but worth a tip of the cap. It's just a quality player. Arden Key is maybe in that conversation as well in terms of mentioning him, but not
mentioning. But yeah, he's not going to surpass those guys.
Maybe one of the running backs. I could see a world where Tajee Spears becomes really high level this year.
For sure. Yeah, Derrick Henry would be a good discussion if he was still here.
Yeah.
But he's not.
He's not.
We put him with the Ravens.
Yeah, where he plays.
Well done. That's a good call not doing the whole NFL.
Right? That would have been
AFC in an hour and a half, plus some breaking news on Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Well done. So good job. We'll go through the AFC, the NFC on Thursday.
Yep.
And then go from there. Anything else?
No.
That's it. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Thursday with more PFF NFL Podcast.